All right, we're going to get started here today. Welcome, everyone. This is the first of our FCM collectives for this new season, the 2023-2024 fall and winter season. Today's session is entitled Cyber Risks and Municipalities, What Leaders Need to Know. FCM is very pleased to be collaborating with our partner, the Canadian Internet Registration Authority, or otherwise known as CIRA, to present today's conversation. So thank you very much to CIRA for your partnership with FCM. My name is Andrea Boyd. I'm the Director of Sponsorship and Events at FCM, and we're pleased to be convening such an important and timely conversation, given that October is Cybersecurity Awareness Month. So we've squeezed this session in on the last day of October. As we move forward with our commitment to reconciliation, I want to acknowledge that I am at FCM's head office today, located on the unceded, unsurrendered territory of the Anishinaabe Algonquin Nation, whose presence here has reached back to time immemorial. As an organization, we endeavor to unlearn colonial mindsets and practices, grow in knowledge, and adapt ways of working. As we continue to build meaningful relationships, we recognize the historic and ongoing contributions of Indigenous peoples and honor their leadership and partnership in shaping and strengthening communities across the country. And I welcome all of you to acknowledge the land that you are joining us from today. So we welcome, we've got members of FCM, colleagues, municipal, not-for-profit, academic, policy, private sector leaders joining us today, coast to coast to coast. So thank you very much for coming to this session and to hearing from a spectrum of perspectives on this topic. Before I turn over to our experts, we have a few housekeeping items. This session is available in simultaneous interpretation. So if you would like to participate, it will be in English. If you would like to participate in this session in French, click on the globe icon at the bottom of the tab and select the French option. If you don't select the language, you'll hear the live audio in English. If you'd like to ask a question, we ask that you put it into the chat. So rather than use the raised hand function, just type your question in and we'll try to get to as many questions as possible within the hour. And please note that this session is being recorded and it will be available on demand on FCM's website. So now I would like to introduce you to our moderator for the session today. We are joined by Emily Laidlaw, Canadian Research Chair in Cybersecurity Law, an associate professor at the University of Calgary in the Faculty of Law. She researches in areas of technology regulation and human rights, with a focus on platform regulation, privacy, and freedom of expression. She's also the author of a book, Regulating Speech in Cyberspace, Gatekeepers, Human Rights, and Corporate Responsibility. So thank you very much, Emily, for joining us today and sharing your wealth of knowledge on this topic. So over to you now to moderate the conversation. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you so much. And what I might do just is ask our panelists to introduce themselves, and then we will launch into a little bit of the discussion just so they get a bit of a sense of your background. First up on my screen, Lindsay, can you introduce yourself?
Hello, everybody, and thanks so much for having me here today. It's a real pleasure. My name is Lindsay MacDonald, and I'm one of the managers in the Cyber Center's partnership team. So Cyber Center is the short form for the Canadian Centre for Cybersecurity. We are a federal department, which is the Communications Security Establishment. Cyber Center is a business line of CSE. And in the partnerships team, we work with critical infrastructure sector owners and operators to provide them cybersecurity advice, guidance, and services, all free. And that includes municipalities. So it's a pleasure to be here.
Yes, I think we'll be returning to you at the end too with some of the key resources because I think they come out of your center. So thank you. Next up, Kevin Paul, will you please introduce yourself to everyone?
Hi, good morning, everybody. My name is Kevin Paul. I'm the Director of Cybersecurity Operations for CIRA. CIRA is the Alberta partner for the National Research and Education Network. And so really quickly, what that is providing network and cybersecurity services to higher educational institutions as well as K-12 and municipalities throughout Alberta. My background, really quickly, I come from a computer science background. I started building high-performance computing clusters at the University of Calgary before I decided to join law enforcement. I did 18 years with the Calgary Police Service, had a blessed career, worked gang suppression, 10 years on the SWAT team, and I finished off my career running the cybercrime team for the Calgary Police Service, working undercover operations and all kinds of cybercrime. And that's pretty much me.
Thanks, Kevin. We'll turn to then Melanie, if you can introduce yourself.
Hi, everybody. Thank you very much for having me participate on such an awesome panel. Appreciate it. My name is Melanie Power. I'm with the Ontario Provincial Police, and I am the Detective Inspector in charge of our cyber operations section. Part of that section I'm responsible for, and I lead our cybercrime investigations team. And over the past 3 years, we've made some real headway with attribution and making some arrests with some of the cyber criminals who are the priority targets for Ontario. So I'm really happy to share some of the things that we've seen and how for municipalities to better protect themselves. Thanks.
Thank you. John, you're up.
Thanks, Emily. And if the plot isn't giving it away already, I'm John Ferguson from CIRA, the Canadian Internet Registration Authority. We're a national not-for-profit that operates a number of services, but depending on where you are, you may know us as the .ca folks. We run the back end for .ca names globally, domain names. We run global DNS services, including Canadian Shield, which is a free protected DNS for blocking bad things on the internet at home. And among other things, focus really heavily on community projects for policy advocacy, really just improving privacy and awareness of all things internet related.
Thank you. So I think we're gonna just launch right into it. And there isn't a day that goes by in the news that we're not seeing some sort of cyber attack. Like I just glanced this morning and the British Museum has been hit, the Toronto Public Library. I think we were all talking last week that, hospitals in Southwest Ontario have been hit. So it's a persistent threat, and I think it's growing. But specific to municipalities, let's start with talking about what the threats are. What are the main threats that are facing municipalities? And then what happens when a cyber attack is successful? John, if you could just jump in and kickstart our conversation.
Sure. Yeah, it's a very interesting situation. I think the reality is for much sector individuals, including municipalities, the challenge is really the same as any other internet-connected organization these days. Ransomware, spam in terms of spear phishing and phishing attempts. Then that's the phone calls, that's the SMSs, that's the emails. There's a constant flood of traffic. The one I guess that we hear about or see about or romanticize maybe more is ransomware, where people hold data hostage. These are all sort of the outcomes that we see in the news or see in the statistics. But ultimately, it boils down to a situation where our municipal constituents, employees, and organizations are entrusted and held responsible for storing a massive amount of information on citizens and on services and running critical infrastructure. And if you're a malicious individual that's looking to disrupt people's lives, the municipalities have an unfortunate, responsibility to protect some of the things that make our lives sort of the best quality they can be. And as a result, they end up being big targets for these similar tactics, but perhaps have a bigger target on the back than we might otherwise assume.
Mm. Yes, and I know that from previous conversations that Melanie, I think that you have quite a few thoughts on what happens when the attack is successful. So I hope you can jump in now. And I will say just to all the panelists, feel free to just jump in as and when you want to contribute to the conversation. I think that everyone benefits from some of that back and forth, so don't feel a need to go through me. Melanie.
So absolutely, when a cyber attack, a breach is successful, we know that it's the worst day possible for the municipality or the industry partner who succumbed to that attack. But the biggest message I want to get across is reporting. It's so critical to report to your police of jurisdiction. We have to, because it's the right thing to do, and we have to all work together in order to be resilient. We are in this ecosystem together, and we are sharing with law enforcement in cyber like we've never shared before. And we see that that is absolutely critical. And as a municipal service, you want to be seen as acting with transparency and responsibility, and reporting to law enforcement is part of that. Public feels better when we get involved, and that we are seen to be partnered and working collaboratively with you to help you navigate your incident. So the first thing, we don't want to interfere with you getting back to operation. We understand that that's critical for you, so we run our investigations parallel. And so it's really important for you to collaborate with us. So some of the things that we bring to the table is, as I mentioned before, we're very collaborative with our other law enforcement partners. We work really well with our US, Interpol, Europol, so we share a lot of intelligence, and we have over the last couple of years. And that intelligence we provide to you. So if a specific threat actor has encrypted your systems, we gather as much intelligence as we can on that particular threat group. We provide that to you. In some circumstances, we can provide the decryption key, so that you don't have to make that difficult decision as to whether or not you have to pay the ransom in order to get your data back or unlock your systems. So that's one of the benefits. And it's essential that we have visibility into how these threat actors are attacking your systems, because a big part of what we do is outreach and awareness. And without, we respect the confidentiality, but we can share the attack vectors with other like-minded industries that might be vulnerable as well. If we can thwart off the attack for them, as an ecosystem, we are that much stronger. So we really do have to collaborate. So reporting is a very big part of that. So I just want to kind of reiterate that.
Yeah, no, and I think that's an important point, because I think sometimes there's not a familiarity about what the relationship is with law enforcement. That's actually more collaborative than it seems, and that
Yes.
You're there to help. If I can then turn to Kevin, we'll turn to Kevin first, because I don't see anyone lifting their hand in particular, but about
I was going to say
threats. Yeah.
I was going to say, I'm going to plug Lindsay as well on this one, in that, yes, report to your police of jurisdiction. There are lots of things that go on in the background that your insurance company or your breach coach might not be aware of, that law enforcement and tools they can help. But also, and I will let Lindsay plug it, but CCS has some awesome opportunities where you can provide information that is under TLP protocol. So you're not named, but those vectors are shared with the community at large. So with that, over to you, Lindsay.
Oh, your sound's off.
I just put it in the chat, how to report an incident to Cyber Center. But I do want to, it is very, very important, and I'll talk about that in a bit, but I do want to first talk about your initial question, which was the threats, the current cyber threats to municipalities. So every second year, the Cyber Center puts together a national cyber threat assessment, NCTA, and you can find it on our website, and I will send the link in the chat at some stage during this hour. The most recent National Cyber Threat Assessment came out in November of 2022, and it's a look ahead for the next 2 years, so throughout 2023 and 2024. And that threat assessment came up with sort of the 5 key judgments that all critical infrastructure need to be aware of and concerned about. These are the 5 key threats that we judge are the most dynamic and the most impactful, and that will continue to drive cyber threat activity over the next year and a bit until the next assessment comes out. So I wanted to talk about those 5. The first one is that ransomware is a persistent threat to Canadian organizations. As already mentioned a few minutes ago, and that is something that we are all very much aware of and concerned about at the Cyber Center. The second key judgment is that critical infrastructure, like all the municipalities, is increasingly at risk from cyber threat activity. I'll go in to talk about why in a second. The third one is that state-sponsored threat activity is impacting Canadians. The fourth one is that cyber threat actors are attempting to influence Canadians and degrade trust in online spaces. So this is the area of misinformation, disinformation, especially around like using social media, but around elections, for example. And the last key judgment is that disruptive technologies, we're talking about quantum, we're talking about AI, machine learning, ChatGPT, that these disruptive technologies bring new opportunities, but also new threats. So if I just loop back very quickly to the first two, first one being ransomware is a persistent threat to Canadians. So I wanted to say that due to ransomware's impact on an organization's ability to function, it is by far what we're seeing at the Cyber Center, the most disruptive form of cybercrime that you face right now. It's big business. Threat actors are selling their skills and their tools online. So ransomware as a service is a thing now. So you no longer have to be a technical expert to be a cyber criminal. It's really lowered the bar to entry, and that's really concerning. Critical infrastructure like municipalities, and also I will include water, utilities, energy in that, because a lot of your municipalities have municipal water and utilities within their mandate. They are the most lucrative ransomware targets because you are the least able to endure operational disruptions. And they know and they think that you're going to pay, which is why they go after you. And we like to remind people that ransomware goes way beyond the financial cost of the ransom itself. You have to factor in the cost of the downtime. This can put up, lives at risk as well. The cost to rebuild your network, cost of the lost data that you might have suffered, and also there's that hidden cost of reputational damage that is pretty significant. And the last thing I'll say on the ransomware piece for now is that like none of your systems are immune. Things like the lack of proper network perimeter defenses, the lack of a timely patching of your software. And here's a big one, the use of outdated or legacy devices, which I'm sure exist in all of your environments. Those are 100% vulnerable 100% of the time. And so please be aware that they may exist on your networks.
Emily, I just want, at the risk of spending our entire time talking about one question, I think there's an important element to what Lindsay's driving home here a bit, and it bears out in some cyber security survey numbers we also had at CIRA here, which respondents we had to our annual survey, 70% of organizations that had a ransomware attack paid ransom, which is a very, very disturbing trend where it continues to grow. And to your core question of what happens when a breach occurs, I think what a lot of the data that's out there underpins is a lot of scrambling happens. Organizations are not uniformly prepared in terms of continuity planning when it comes to cyber risk. We've heard a lot about business continuity, disaster recovery from a general business perspective, but cyber incident response plans and knowing what you are going to do in your organization and your own individual responsibility when something happens, we got to get to a point where that's clearly understood so that people aren't in panic mode to recover. Because as we've outlined here from the panel, everybody, once something happens, is under an immense amount of pressure to manage their stakeholders. And the only way to to me, in my mind, to get away from paying ransomware is to create better alternatives for management to choose from. I.e., I can recover my data, I can abandon that system because I have redundancies, and a lot of this comes down to planning.
I did expect that we would actually spend more time on this question than all the other ones, and maybe I'll interject with one quick question of everyone, which is, if we're on the topic of ransomware, and I think I know the answer from Kevin and Melanie, what is your advice about paying? I can tell you that from my perspective, the answer is sometimes it violates sanctions laws, so you have to be very careful because it might actually be illegal to pay it. But that, the answer is perhaps sometimes. It really is going to depend on the scenario in front of them. And I know that is not an ideal scenario, but if you're facing like a hospital with services down and critically ill patients, say children, then which I know is one specific incident, then you might pay. But I feel like in saying that, I should turn to our law enforcement folks. So Melanie, and then Kevin.
Yeah, absolutely. So from a law enforcement perspective, we don't support paying the ransom. We understand it's a business decision, but it reminds me of when I was a little girl and we had the terrorist attacks on the planes, and it took away, there was a global response. We are not going to allow terrorists to take planes, and that's whole supply and demand. And it's the same thing with cyber. We are getting hammered. And I think collectively, we all need to stand up and like John said before, have a plan. Be as cyber resilient as you possibly can with your own critical infrastructure. Have that unanimously decided that, no, we're not paying the ransom. We're going to be able to rebuild because this money is often going to state actors and it's funding other things politically that you would not want to be a part of. So being prepared, and not paying is what we suggest, but we empathize that it's a business decision, and sometimes as you said, you have cancer patients, and that's absolutely horrible. So we don't judge for organizations what their decisions are, but a great plan may avoid you ever having to make that decision.
Yeah, and I think that the data is that you tend to be a mark, right? So once you've paid, you're
well, 70% get hit again, and so you need to be prepared for that because they're criminals. They're not upstanding business people who say, we're just here to help you patch your systems, which I've heard before. They're actually there to hit you again.
Kevin, what are your thoughts?
Yeah, and I will reiterate exactly the same thing. Like, from law enforcement, don't pay the ransom. I think if it was mandated, it would take it away from the companies, which would be really nice. But I also am a realist, and I understand, like, you have a mom and pop shop, and if you don't pay, your business goes out of business. You have no business, and so people are in tough spots, and and that's just at the smaller level. Best practice is not to pay. Even better practice would be if the federal government took away the ability to pay and said, in Canada, you cannot pay a ransom. We already say that with terrorist organizations and people on the sanctions list. But that's at a level way above me. And then you have to make the choices for your business. And as law enforcement, we understand that as well.
John and I were at a conference earlier this year, and that was exactly some of the conversation, is that it actually should be just prohibited in Canada. And I wonder if we should then we're going to move on. I am conscious of time because I think we should dig into some of the specific challenges that municipalities face. Kevin, I had let you know that I wanted to start with you on this particular one.
Yeah, absolutely. And I mean, I'm assuming I'm preaching to the choir here. A lot of the, the challenges that you face, funding being a major one, just like any public institution, the same as our universities, the same as our as our K-12s, municipalities have that same problem. Like, where does the funding come from for this? Another issue being some of the size, like some of the smaller municipalities, you have a one-man IT shop who, he goes down to the store and buys your computer, he does your backups, he does everything. Where does cybersecurity fit into sort of that IT department? It's a different thing when you're talking about the city of Calgary or the city of Edmonton, where you have large IT departments. I think another big issue that we see at the municipal level is sort of the heterogeneous architecture. Everybody sort of has different architecture. Even within the same municipality, you have a very varied group of systems that you need to protect, and that makes it that much more difficult. And that goes right to OT, or operational technology, which is a bit of what Lindsay touched on. And I will reiterate that with personal experience, in that I had a file where a municipality, we got notification that there was a SCADA that bad actors had access to a system. We got the SCADA diagram, and it turned out to be a water treatment plant. And so by opening one valve through OT, you could poison the entire municipality by overloading it with chlorine. So the threat surface that municipalities have is massive and very difficult. And then the last point I'll hit is that you have this varied level of education, knowledge, and experience when it comes to cybercrime. You have elected officials, who have very in-depth knowledge, and some who have none. And you also have staff with the same sort of levels of experience all over the place. I know previous to this, I was the director of emergency management, and our elected officials were mandated to take a emergency management half-day course when they were elected. But we don't see anything like that on the cyber side. And so I think that something like that would help.
Yeah, I agree. And something we have talked about is that I separately work at the city of Calgary, not in a cyber capacity, but they mandate cybersecurity training for anyone who works for the city of Calgary now. So that has become a key focus, but that complexity of the municipal environment, and that it's such a frontline service, but also chronically, I think, underfunded to deal with some of these issues. So that problem of legacy systems is very real for municipalities. And I think, Melanie, you've almost tied together many of these points. So I don't know if you have something to add here about these challenges.
Yeah, absolutely. So it always comes down to money. And, if we had an abundance, we would be able to, overcome all of our challenges, but we have to pick and choose. So there's two things I think is really important. One is that you have to have cybersecurity expert representation at the executive level. It can't be like several levels down when you just never hear the voice. They're not able to give their opinion. As a municipality, as you're entering and thinking about merging things, bringing in other systems, and it's probably going to be great for your population. You're putting municipalities together. If you don't have that cybersecurity expertise at that level to offer their opinion, there's going to be huge issues. And I've seen it with a number of major cyber attacks. And just a little bit of knowledge would have helped the organization. The second thing is people are our greatest resource within every organization, but they can also be our greatest vulnerability. And so within our own organization, we have spent the last 5-6 years really increasing the level of education and awareness on how each member of our organization, civilian and uniform, can contribute to the cybersecurity and posture of the Ontario Provincial Police. And that's critical. So it's those spear phishing campaigns and knowing when not to click, and then having a mechanism in the municipality so that they can report those suspicious emails. Municipalities are so susceptible because you're constantly hiring. The threat actors are sophisticated. They're putting malware within the resumes and they're sending it to you. And unbeknownst to you, remember, they're hitting it, opening it up, and malware has been deposited on that one computer. So These are things that they have to be aware. If they're not expecting the email, then maybe they don't open it up, or they confirm the sender. And they're actually looking at the email addresses, because the hackers will just change one digit, and then all of a sudden you think you're paying your invoice for $800,000, and it's going offshore. So just that increased awareness is a big part of it.
Well,
To that,
Oh.
if possible.
Sorry, I was hoping to jump in here, because one of the things that I think I find challenging about these conversations is sort of Kevin, I'll pick on you, made the statement, maybe Calgary, city of Calgary doesn't need to worry about it, but everyone else does. It doesn't matter how big you are as a municipality, a bank, a government, you can't deal with this defense on your own. I think, yes, everybody always needs more money to do more things, but I don't honestly, personally believe that's the biggest challenge we have here. I think there's a mindset shift that we haven't made collectively yet, that this is a communal defense problem, and we need to get together to solve the solution. We've talked about it already on the panel about how data sharing can help with that, but the power of municipal procurement shouldn't be underestimated here. When we go and build a new water treatment plant, there's environmental assessments, there are any number of stakeholder engagements. How rigorous are the cybersecurity qualifications or standards that have to be employed? Are we looking at the life cycle? I spent over a decade in Internet of Things and industrial IoT, and you're planning an infrastructure that's got to last decades. That infrastructure is going to cross many jurisdictions, and the cyber strategy can't match the infrastructure strategy. The cyber cadence, all the things that Lindsay brought up in terms of AI and all these modern tools, it's the cycle of attacks, and the change of rate of those attacks is astronomically increasing. So we need more dynamic defenses, and we need to just embrace the fact that change is part of the game here, and we have to be nimble and agile and all those wonderful adjectives for doing things, and hopefully doing them together.
Well, and that makes me think here, because I see Lindsay is making contributions to the chat as well as we go along, because you raise this issue of just sort of almost pooling of resources. And one of the questions had been is, are there any funding available to help municipalities in closing some of those gaps? And so maybe part of that is about, first, if anyone can speak to any of that funding, but also about that pooling of resources and working together to try to address this is one of those avenues. Lindsay, you look frozen on my screen, but I was going to turn to you. Are you there?
Do you hear me?
I can. Okay, you're back. It might just be on my end, but I'm quite keen to turn to you, because I think that you framed this discussion we're having around like these 5 key threats of ransomware, critical infrastructure, state-sponsored, the disinformation campaigns, and what's coming. Generative AI is here, etc. So if you can speak really to how these sort of threats translate into specific challenges for municipalities, operational technologies. I know Kevin's talked about that. That's something you've talked about previously as well.
Yeah, I'd love to. So I think, well, there's so much to say. So first of all, let's start with operational technology. So operational technology are things like sensors or meters that you're connecting to your IT networks. And traditionally, these operational technologies have not had internet protocol on them. And we're seeing more and more that these technologies are being developed and designed with internet protocol so that you can add them to your networks. And there's a lot of things that should be considered when you start adding operational technologies to your IT infrastructure, because OT is now really increasing the exposure of your networks. And therefore, like one of my colleagues mentioned, is really increasing the threat surface here. And what that means is it translates into the potential number of ways that a threat actor can exploit your network. And I can confidently say that the threats that are associated with operational technology are becoming an increasing concern for us at the Cyber Center. And municipalities have a lot of OT. You know, you don't have to look too far, whether you're talking about sensors on some of your waste collection bins to notify waste management systems when those bins need to be emptied, or smart meters for energy, allowing communities to monitor energy usage and so on. Like, these operational technologies are everywhere on municipal infrastructure. And, you know, they're great in that they've provided some lots of management and productivity benefits, because now you can, you know, maybe have your contractors or third parties access the devices for upgrades or whatnot. But like I said, they really expand the threat surface and provide new threat vectors in. And in the situation in Florida recently, where they were able to navigate in the traditional, threat actors came in the traditional way onto the water network through the IT remote access, they can just propagate through your network, and they can end up in your SCADA or ICS or OT device, and they can adjust and monitor the chemical levels, and that could, like we discussed, poison the water. So that's one of the pieces here in terms of where municipalities face some challenges. I think another area that I'm not sure we've mentioned too much on yet, that is the supply chain attacks. And I think that municipalities face an incredible challenge, really, with understanding their supply chain and the cyber posture of their supply chain. And these supply chain attacks, it's a real evolving threat where the threat actors target third-party software suppliers. And so they get their malware into those supplier softwares, and when you get an upgrade to that software, voila, you now have malware on your infrastructure. We saw this many times over the last 3 years. Probably one of the biggest ones was a couple of years ago called SolarWinds compromise, when that software was compromised and everybody who had the SolarWinds product upgraded to the next version, and then they all ended up with threat actors on their networks. So those are a couple of the challenges I really see with municipalities. And I just want to echo what I love what Melanie said about cybersecurity is often still seen as an IT or a technical issue, but it's really a business issue and a business concern that really needs to be represented at the senior executive level or your board level. It's something that should be talked about at the highest level possible in terms of what the risks are and what risk tolerance your particular municipality has. And the other piece that I just wanted to throw out is, again, training and awareness for your staff is really huge and really important. But let's not forget that it only takes one click on one malicious URL or in a text message, which we call smishing, for a threat actor to gain access to your network. And because of that, I cannot promote having a protected DNS service more. Like, I think that there's a number of, you know, controls that we can put in place for defense in depth on our perimeter, but having a protected DNS service, CIRA has one of them. They're not the only one in the business, but a protected DNS server that, you know, will prevent malicious actors getting onto your networks, even if they've clicked on a malicious URL. So I think I'll pause there.
Yeah, and I'm conscious of time, but also some of the questions are being answered in the text or in the chat. So I'm gonna turn to you, John, for just a second, because I want you to comment on two things. One is to actually explain what CIRA offers with this protected DNS service. But the other is, I know that you have some stats recently about the investment of organizations into cybersecurity protection, and kind of that skewed protection on the tech side versus the governance side.
Yeah, I mean, so protected DNS, blocking malicious domain names is something that, to Lindsay's point, there's lots of services that do it. CIRA, I suppose, does things a little bit differently from a standpoint that we give it away for free for all home users. That's Canadian Shield, so download it, install it on your phones, put it on your routers at home, and use it. And we keep all that data in Canada, which is another big topic, which I don't think we're gonna have time to unpack, but making choices with your data vendors and partners and looking at data sovereignty and data protection. There's a lot of changing policies around the world and in the internet on how different jurisdictions, what they will do with the data or what they're entitled to do. And so I always encourage you to understand those wonderful end user license agreements that we so diligently read through on a day-to-day basis. So there's a lot there that can be done. And certainly there's a ton of municipalities that we work with directly, a lot of schools we work with directly to do protected DNS, because it is one of those baseline things you can do. And a lot of people will tell you that when I'm trying to trace a problem, DNS, whether or not it's protected DNS, it's your own internal threat feeds, DNS is often a great forensics place to start looking about how threat actors moved through the environment. So just understanding your DNS infrastructure can help you a lot when you're trying to deal with some of these issues. From the resourcing question, again, the survey that we ran out, just that came out, it's all on CIRA.ca. 73% of the responding organizations indicated their IT budgets specific to cybersecurity have increased in the last 12 months. So one could argue that people are getting more money, or maybe people are hearing the call for more funding. Whether it's enough, who knows? Whether it's being spent on the right things, again, another debate to be had. But certainly there are increases in focus on this particular area, which I think is one of the positive signs perhaps that we're seeing.
Well, and I think this naturally then leads to the next question that we have, which is really what to your mind is the single most effective thing municipalities can do to protect themselves right now? And I will tell the audience that we actually don't know at all what the answers are from the panelists. So part of my curiosity is going to be whether they've come up with the same thing. So Melanie, if you could get us started here.
Yeah, like I said before, really important to have that executive level representation. It's key. Number two is education and awareness for your own personnel, and ensuring that there's a mechanism that they can share concerns with you. What does that look like, and how do they report that? And third is the collaboration that has to happen, because as I said before, we are all part of this ecosystem, and we all have to work together if we are going to improve our posture. Very, very important. So don't cut our partnerships out. We have to work together. Ensure that you have a collaboration at the municipal level where you are sharing information with each other, and you're meeting regularly to discuss what the attack vectors are, so that you can patch your systems before you succumb. And the last thing is that in speaking with municipalities over the last couple of years, you can't have that hope that, geez, it probably will never happen to us. You have to come from the perspective, when it happens, we will be ready, and here's our plan.
Kevin.
You know what? Number one, collaboration within the sector. And I think that's something that CIBERA pushes quite a bit with all of our members, whether that is training or SOC services, but I think collaboration within the sector and within this community, and you see sort of the four of us coming together to talk about pretty much the same things. I'll give you collaboration is number one. I'll go a little more technical on you. MFA. That is my number one help for municipalities. I can't tell you the number of files I worked where, had MFA been implemented, it would have solved or stopped the issue. It's not, a golden pill, but it certainly is way up there. And I'll give you my third is XDR, MDR. The higher up in the kill chain that we can get this and block it, I think is the best. So with that, I'll turn it over to Lindsay.
Great. So obviously, I love collaboration. That's why the Cyber Center is here to support you and collaborate with municipalities any way we can. I will reiterate what Kevin said, MFA, 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 but I will add my own 3-word
Can you
sentence.
explain what MFA is? Because there is one question about that.
Multi-factor authentication. Yeah. So being able to log in with more than just a password, maybe having an RSA key or biometrics, something like that. But yeah, so I will add patch. So many times we see at the Cyber Center, we've released information on new vulnerabilities, especially vulnerabilities where we see threat actors are exploiting in the Canadian landscape, and people have not patched their systems. So I will say patch. But actually, my number one thing, and I will raise it above everything else, and that is have an incident response plan that you have tested. Because again, it's not a matter of if this is going to happen, it's just when. And make sure that you have a good plan, make sure you have a good communications plan. You know who you're going to reach out to, you know who your MSSP is going to be, you know who to call and when to call. And it's so important to have that tested. Test your backups. And that's my number one, incident response plan that's tested.
Well, yeah, and by that testing, I mean, there's so many companies now that do tabletop exercises, and that can be really, catering to the specific threats that face whatever the organization is. So they can do one specific to municipalities. I mean, they've come in and done it with my law students just to sort of prepare them so they get the sense of it. And John.
I get to try to tie this all together, do I? All great recommendations, but my biggest, I guess, point of advice is to advocate for a shift in mindset, because too often these are CapEx or silver bullet type. Let's just put MFA in and then everything's okay. Well, no, we don't yet know what the next thing that's going to kill MFA is, or the next thing after that, or the next thing after that. We need to move to a mindset. This is an operational expenditure. This is about where you are at a point in time. So my recommendation to every organization, municipality or not, is take one of the frameworks, the NIST framework, the CMMC framework. These are all tools for assessing your cybersecurity maturity. And it is okay to completely suck at some things. That is the first step. Admitting you have a problem is the first step to fixing it. So you take those types of tools, you benchmark. They also provide great recommendations on areas where you can have quick wins, and you reassess. You implement something and you reassess. The only thing that we can say you're guilty of if you do it is nothing. So there's so many little things that aren't necessarily budget, aren't necessarily major changes to organizations, that will incrementally improve your posture, that organizations of all sizes can take on. It's just really a matter of unpacking your threat landscape in a way that people can understand. And business people love matrices and things that can be checked off lists. So it can be a great tool for the municipal leaders as they try to walk in and make that discussion for, I need a little bit more money, I need a little bit more people. Hey, I need to share this information with other municipalities or else I can't do these things. And so I think it's a great way to do it. It's a great tool to drive a long-term program, and ultimately that to me is what will win the day.
Well, one of the questions in the chat, they were asking about the fact that, I mean, it was an issue of sort of how do you deal with NDAs, like the idea that some of these smaller municipalities, the barriers that they might face where, each has to pay to understand the risks of a system that maybe has already been assessed by another municipality or public sector entity. And the question is, currently there's no regulatory regime, provincial or federal, that would allow for NDAs to be bypassed. For everyone here, non-disclosure agreements in the service of sharing vendor-specific information security insights among the broader public sector. So everyone ends up taking more risks than necessary or takes on more costs than necessary. And I wonder if anyone has any comments about that specific point. And I think that feeds in some of the questions about, you know, the funding for cybersecurity, both the technical needs and the human resources needs that feed into this.
I responded in the chat, so I'm happy to kick us off. I mean,
Sure.
I hold a geography degree in statistics and have been working in cybersecurity for a decade plus. This is a multidisciplinary problem: data engineering, software development. This particular issue around NDAs and data sharing, there's a lot of brilliant legal minds that can help unpack that. And in a lot of ways, there's certain types of data that you can share free already, but some of that starts with how you negotiate your vendor contract, right? So if you have it in mind, you've made that mind shift to say, I will share data, and this is a key tenet of our programs, and Kevin at CIRA and his colleagues across the higher ed sector have been going down this road and dealing with those difficult problems. If you start with that mindset, then you can push that in. People voting with their dollars will change a lot of the vendor behavior because ultimately they're after the business.
Yeah, and I think I'll echo that is, you know, have that written into your contracts ahead of time, or even better, band together. Like I know in Alberta, in the higher ed sector, we have Share IT, and I think they're starting to bring in municipalities in K-12, and that is leveraging procurement across the sector. And so when you do that, those NDAs, they apply to everybody and they're written so that everybody can share that data. So I think look at then back to Mel, collaboration. And if we can get that collaboration ahead, especially on procurement, you know, it's not just the money you're saving, but it is also, you know, setting it up so that we can all work together with these NDAs.
And I have been advised that we are running out of time. And I think one of the most important things for those listening would be, what do you walk away with? Like what kind of, where do we turn now? What are the resources that municipalities could actually use today to minimize risk? I think given the nature of your work, I'll start with you, Lindsay, and then Kevin, I want to turn to you. I mean, you do a lot of this work as well with CIRA. So Lindsay.
Thank you, Emily. Okay, so I just posted in the chat again for a second time today how to contact the municipalities sector here at the Cyber Center. They are very excited to hear from every single one of you and to set up initial one-on-one conversations to address exactly how we can support your municipality in terms of providing threat intelligence, providing vulnerability notifications on your IT space, doing malware analysis on potential malicious files, providing you with indicators of compromise, inviting you onto our joint threat briefs that happen every 2 weeks, where we very quickly brief IT security professionals on the key vulnerabilities that we're worried about at the Cyber Center, the new threat actors, the new techniques that they're employing. We do want to hear from you, and I do encourage you to reach out to that municipalities email. The other thing that I will, I'll post it in the chat as my colleagues start to discuss this as well, but we have a ton of publications on our external website. I've been posting them here in the chat. I'll post some more that I think might be of interest to municipalities. But again, if there's something that you're specifically looking for that you can't find, please reach out to the municipalities inbox there, and we'll get back to you. And the last thing that I will say in terms of resources, I think it was Kevin that was mentioning this, and that is making sure that you've done a baseline cybersecurity posture assessment. There is a free tool that we co-developed with Public Safety. It's called the Canadian Cybersecurity Tool, CCST. I'll post it in the chat here, the link to it. It is a very quick 100-question self-assessment tool that is actually linked to the NIST framework, the 5 pillars in NIST. you'll get your anonymized report the next day, which will show you where your technical gaps are, where your programmatic gaps are, and how you score in each of those 5 NIST pillars in terms of prevention, recovery, and the other 3. And also, we don't get those reports. You do, they're anonymized to your organization. We get the raw data, fine. But if you want any kind of support in terms of looking at those reports and identifying some really good initiatives to start addressing some of your gaps, please reach out to us, again, at that municipalities inbox. And the Cyber Center is more than happy to work with your IT teams to come up with a cybersecurity plan and an incident response plan.
Thank you. And, you know, I am conscious that I will be in deep trouble if I don't wrap this up within the next minute or two. And I know everyone wants to hear more. So let me just ask quickly, even like bullet point, just say some stuff, Kevin. And if there's anything to add, John, of course, CIRA does a lot here too, and then Melanie.
Okay, so really quickly, I think we've hit most of it. CCCS is a huge piece. Those weekly calls or biweekly calls are awesome. Within your province probably has something. I know Alberta has a community of interest. I'm gonna link one more, and that is the Canadian Anti-Fraud Center. And I'm gonna take it all the way back to the stuff John said right at the beginning, those links that you get, the business email compromises, the smishing. A lot of this is plain old fraud. It's cyber-enabled fraud. It's not big and cool like talking about breaches. It is, hey, this is the CEO. Can you go to Co-op and buy me a whole bunch of gift cards? So that's my last one. And over to the next.
Good point.
I'll toss one last thing out there. Yes, CIRA.ca, go and read. There's lots of material. Canadian Shield info's there. It's free. Use it. But also from a municipal level, our citizens, our constituents, we protect them and we reduce the risk attack vectors that the overall systems employ. So I think there's thought leadership and communication that the municipalities can help with, enable, and hopefully that's also something. Again, it's not just about the tech tools, it's also about making people aware of the threats and aware of these tools we're sharing with you folks today as well.
Thank you. Andrea is now on the screen. Melanie, do you have one sentence?
Just have a plan, work together. It can seem monumental, but it's one bite at a time. If you don't know, ask for help. We are all here to help.
Great way to end it. Thank you so much. And thank you so much to the panel. You guys were brilliant. I'd love to hear more from you every day.
Thank you so much, Emily. And I have to say thank you so much to Kevin, John, Lindsay, and Melanie. Really terrific insights. And I think someone said in the chat, a tremendous resource for municipalities of all sizes. So we will be sharing, everyone that's participated today will get a thank you email, and we will share some of these resources with you in that email. They'll also be available on our website, and we'll be posting a recording of this session on our website. So please share this with your colleagues and other members of FCM. So thanks for convening such a critical conversation. Thank you, CIRA, for all your support and for connecting our members to all of these resources. So if you've enjoyed today's conversation, please join us for our next collective webinar. We'll be having another one next month on the tourism sector. So we're really exploring different areas of municipal life with the FCM Collective. So thanks again to everyone. A special thank you, Emily, for leading such a really interesting conversation today. Thank you. Have a happy Halloween, everyone. Bye for now.
Thanks, everyone.